My name is Alina. I'm 34 and I live in Denver. And honestly, I thought Marcus and I had something solid. He's 36, easygoing, the kind of guy who never really gets worked up about anything, which used to balance me out perfectly because, well, I can be a bit much sometimes. That evening, we ended up at his buddy Tyler's party, and Marcus doesn't exactly have a huge social circle, so when he actually wanted to go out and see people, I figured I should make the effort, right? I thought we'd show up, have a couple drinks, maybe stay 2 hours tops, then head home. It all started normal enough. The place was absolutely packed. Everyone seemed to know each other, which made sense since Marcus had been tight with most of these people for years. I didn't know everyone there, but that's never really bothered me. I'm pretty decent at working a room, and honestly, I kind of enjoy being the center of attention when I'm feeling it. So while Marcus caught up with Tyler, I mingled around, made small talk, the usual party stuff. A few hours in, this group of us ended up sitting in a circle, just talking and laughing about random things, having a good time. At some point, someone threw out this question about relationships. Trust, specifically. Like, how much do you really trust your partner to have your back if things got dangerous? It was all hypothetical, of course, but the question made me smirk. I glanced over at Marcus, who was sitting right next to me, quiet as always, and before I even really thought about it, I said something like, "Oh, I know Marcus couldn't protect me. I mean, just look at him." It got a huge laugh, and I felt that little rush, that buzz you get when you know you've landed a good joke. So naturally, I kept going. I teased him about how he never works out, how he can barely open a jar of pickles sometimes, threw in this bit about how if someone tried to mug us, we'd both end up as victims because he'd just completely freeze up. People were dying laughing. Even Tyler jumped in with some joke about Marcus skipping leg day, and it just turned into this whole roast session. But Marcus, he didn't say anything. He just sat there with this weird half smile like he was trying not to make things awkward, but I could tell he wasn't actually laughing. So, of course, instead of reading the room and stopping, I doubled down. I pointed at his arms and said something like, "Seriously though, he's got arms like a 7th grader? No offense, babe." People absolutely lost it again. I mean, it was funny, right? And it's not like I was saying anything that wasn't true. But then, out of absolutely nowhere, Marcus just stood up. Just like that. Grabbed his jacket and walked straight out of the room. No explanation, nothing, not a word to anyone. At first I thought maybe he was just going to the bathroom or needed some air or something, but when he didn't come back after a couple of minutes, I realized he was gone. Like gone. Left the party completely. The mood in the room shifted immediately. You could feel it. People stopped laughing and there was this super awkward silence hanging over everything. Tyler looked at me and was like, "You okay?" That was kind of harsh, which completely threw me off because in my head, it was just a joke. We've tased each other before. It's not like I crossed some massive line or broke some unspoken rule, right? Still, I tried to play it off cool. I shrugged and said something like, "He's probably just tired or whatever, he's fine." But inside, I was actually pretty annoyed. Like, what was his problem? It's not like I was lying about anything, and it's not like anyone there was going to think less of him. If anything, I thought I was making him look good, for being able to laugh at himself and take a joke. Daytime delivery. So I stayed at the party for a little while longer, but it just wasn't the same after that. People were polite enough, but the vibe was completely off, and I felt this weird mixture of irritation and embarrassment sitting in my chest. Finally, I said my goodbyes and called a rideshare home. When I got back, Marcus was already in bed, pretending to be asleep. I didn't say anything to him that night. I just figured he'd get over it by morning. That's usually how these things work with us. But the next day, things felt different. He barely spoke to me, and when he did, it was short and clipped, like he couldn't even be bothered to look at me properly. I finally asked him what his deal was, and he just stared at me and said, "You humiliated me in front of my friends." That honestly caught me off guard because, again, I really didn't think it was that serious. I told him, "It was a joke, Marcus. Don't be so sensitive." But he didn't respond. He just walked out of the room. And that's when I realized this wasn't going to blow over like I thought. When I woke up the next morning, Marcus was already up, sitting at the kitchen table with his coffee. And he didn't even look up when I walked in, which immediately irritated me. I mean, fine, he was upset the night before, but this whole silent treatment thing wasn't going to work for me. "Morning," I said, pouring myself a cup. Nothing. No response. He just kept scrolling on his phone like I wasn't even standing there. "Okay, are we seriously doing this?" I asked, sitting down across from him. "Because if we are, let's just get it over with." He set his phone down and finally looked at me. "Why would you think it's okay to humiliate me like that in front of my friends?" His voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp, cutting. "Oh my God, Marcus, are you still on this? It was a joke," I said, rolling my eyes. "I wasn't trying to humiliate you." "Well, that's exactly what you did," he snapped back. "You made me feel like a fool in front of everyone. You don't think I already know I'm not the strongest guy in the world? You didn't need to put it on display like that." I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms, trying to stay calm. "Okay, but you left me there, Marcus, alone. You're mad about a joke, but you thought it was fine to just walk out and leave your wife at your friend's house? How is that okay?" "I needed to get out of there," he said, shaking his head. "Do you have any idea how disrespectful you were? You don't talk about your husband like that, Elena, especially not in front of other people. It's like you were trying to embarrass me on purpose." I let out this short laugh, more out of frustration than anything else. "Marcus, it was teasing. Everyone was laughing. It's not like I stood up and gave some speech about how you're a complete failure. And honestly, walking out like that didn't exactly prove me wrong either. You left me there to get a ride home by myself like I was some random person. What kind of man does that?" His face turned red, and I could see him clenching his jaw, really working to keep his composure. "You don't get it, do you?" he said, his voice getting louder now. "You don't respect me. If you did, you wouldn't have said half the stuff you said last night. You wouldn't have kept going when you saw how uncomfortable I was." I threw up my hands, getting defensive now. "Of course I respect you, Marcus, but you didn't exactly act respectable last night, did you? A grown man doesn't just storm out and leave his wife behind because he's upset over a joke. You could have pulled me aside and said something, but instead you bailed and now you want to lecture me about respect?" He stared at me for a long moment, and I could tell he was really processing what I'd just said, turning it over in his mind. Finally, he sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "You're right," he muttered. "I shouldn't have left you there. That wasn't okay." I raised my eyebrow, actually kind of surprised he was admitting it. "Yeah, that's what I thought," I said, leaning forward a bit. "So maybe next time don't overreact and make things worse. If you had just talked to me like an adult, we wouldn't even be having this conversation right now." He didn't say anything for a second, just looked down at his coffee cup, turning it slowly in his hands. "I just wish you'd think about how what you say affects me," he quietly. "I'm not asking you to change who you are, just think about it, that's all." I shrugged, not really wanting to push it any further now that he'd apologized and basically admitted I was right. "Sure, I'll think about it, but you also need to think about how you handle things. Deal?" He nodded, though he still looked annoyed, kind of distant, and I could tell this wasn't completely over for him, but for me, as far as I could tell, the matter was settled. After our conversation, I actually felt pretty good about things. Marcus had apologized, which meant I'd won the argument. And that was that, as far as I could tell. Sure, he still seemed a little off for the next few days, but he'd get over it eventually. He always did. That's how our relationship worked. He'd get upset about something, I'd hold my ground and explain why I was right, and eventually he'd come around and see it my way. I didn't even have to think about it anymore. It was just our dynamic. Marcus wasn't exactly the take charge kind of guy, you know? I'd always been the one who kept things moving in our relationship, whether it was making plans, handling the finances, deciding what to watch, what to eat, all of it. He didn't mind. If anything, I think he actually liked it that way. It's not like he ever fought me on anything. So when I say I was the one in control, I'm not exaggerating. That's just how we were, and it worked. Well, it worked for me, at least. A couple nights later, Marcus told me he was going out for dinner with some friends. Tyler and the guys, he said. Like, that was all the explanation I needed.
I raised an eyebrow but didn't really press him on it. I mean, I could guess what this was probably about, one of those guys' nights where they all sit around and hash out their feelings over beers and burgers, probably talking about how awful I am and how Marcus deserves so much better. Still, I didn't say anything about it. If Marcus needed to vent to them, whatever, let him get it out of his system. He'd come home and we'd go back to normal. That's what I thought.
But when he came back that night, something was different. It wasn't anything dramatic. He wasn't storming in with accusations or starting another argument or anything like that. It was more subtle than that. He was quieter than usual, like he was lost in thought, turning something over in his mind. And when I asked him how dinner was, he just shrugged and said, "It was fine." "Just fine?" I teased, trying to lighten the mood a bit. "What, did Tyler burn the steak or something?" He gave me this small, almost forced smile and said, "No, the food was good, just had a lot on my mind. That's all." That was weird for Marcus. Normally, he'd tell me everything about what they talked about, who said what, which joke got the biggest laugh, all the details. But not this time. This time he just brushed it off and went to bed early, leaving me sitting there on the couch, wondering what the hell was actually going on. Over the next few days, I started noticing more changes. Little things, at first, that I tried to brush off. He didn't seem as eager to just go along with my plans anymore. Like, when I suggested we watch a movie, he'd say, "You pick, I'll just watch whatever." But in this tone that felt more annoyed than indifferent, you know? Or when I brought up our weekend plans, he casually mentioned that he might go hiking with Tyler instead, which was not something he'd normally do at all. Marcus wasn't a big outdoors guy. That was never his thing. But it wasn't just his actions that felt different. It was his whole attitude. He seemed more confident, maybe? I don't really know how else to describe it. It was like he wasn't waiting for my approval before doing things anymore. Like he'd made some kind of decision without me. I wasn't used to it and I didn't like it. Not because I wanted to control him or anything. Okay, maybe a little. But because it felt like he was pulling away from me, shutting me out, and I had no idea why or what had changed. One night, I finally brought it up. "You've been acting different lately," I said, while we were getting ready for bed. "What's going on?" He looked at me, and for a second, I thought he was going to deny it, brush it off like it was nothing. But then he said, "I've just been thinking a lot. About us, about me, about what I actually want." That threw me off completely. "What you want," I repeated, trying to keep my voice calm and steady. "What's that supposed to mean?" He shrugged, looking away. "Just that I've been letting things slide for way too long. I've been too passive, too whatever. I need to start standing up for myself more. That's all." I laughed, trying to play it off, but inside I felt this weird pang of unease creeping in. "You make it sound like I've been running some kind of dictatorship or something. Is this still about the party? Because we already talked about that. We settled it." "It's not just the party," he said, looking me straight in the eye with this intensity I wasn't used to seeing from him. "It's everything." And just like that, the entire conversation shifted. It wasn't about one night or one joke anymore. It was about our entire relationship, the whole foundation of it. And for the first time, I started to realize he might not be okay with how things had always been between us. For the first time, I wondered if I was actually losing control of this situation. Marcus came home from work one evening, and I could tell immediately something was on his mind. He had that serious look, the one he gets when he's been rehearsing something in his head for hours, maybe even days. I didn't ask him what it was, though. If it was important, he'd tell me eventually. Or at least that's how it usually went with us. We had dinner, mostly in silence, this heavy kind of quiet that felt like it was pressing down on both of us. And then, just as I was clearing the plates from the table, he finally spoke up. "We need to talk." I sighed, already feeling annoyed before we'd even started. Okay, what now? He didn't flinch at my tone, which was unusual for him. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, his arms crossed over his chest. Why do you treat me the way you do? That caught me completely off guard. What are you even talking about? I mean, the way you talk to me, the way you act like you're the only one that matters in this relationship. Do you even respect me, Elena? Honestly? Uri rolled my eyes, feeling defensive immediately. Of course I respect you, Marcus. You're my husband. Why are you even asking me that? He shook his head, looking frustrated now. Because you don't act like it. You humiliated me in front of my friends, and when I tried to tell you how I felt about it, you made it all about how I overreacted. You don't listen to me. You don't care what I want, and half the time it feels like I'm just here to be your punching bag, someone you can mock whenever you feel like it. That's not fair, I shot back. I wasn't trying to humiliate you. I told you it was a joke. You're the one who made it into this huge thing. Alina, he said, his voice getting sharper now, cutting through my excuses. This isn't just about the party anymore. It's everything. The way you talk to me, the way you dismiss me when I try to say how I feel. If you really respected me, you wouldn't treat me like this. I felt my face heating up, anger rising. Marcus, don't act like you're some perfect angel in all of this. You don't stand up for yourself, you let me handle everything, make all the decisions, and now you want to sit here and act like I'm the bad guy. Maybe if you stepped up more, I wouldn't have to take charge all the time. That's not an answer, he said, cutting me off before I could keep going. Why did you even marry me if you don't respect me? Was it convenience? Because I was safe? Or was there something else? Because I'm starting to think I'm not the person you actually wanted to marry. That maybe I was just good enough. I froze, the words hitting me like an actual physical slap. That's ridiculous, I said quickly. Maybe too quickly. You're twisting this into something it's not. Am I? He challenged, his voice rising now, emotion breaking through. Because the way you treat me doesn't feel like love, Elena. It feels like I'm just here, like I'm not enough for you. And maybe I never was. Maybe I was never what you really wanted. That's not true, I snapped. But even as I said it, I could feel the cracks forming in my defense, feel myself scrambling. You're overthinking this. You're letting your friends get in your head, aren't you? They've been filling you with this nonsense, and now you're trying to blame me for things that aren't even real. My friends didn't make me feel this way. You did. They just gave me the push to finally say something about it. And I'm glad they did, because we can't keep going like this, Elena. This isn't healthy. It's not fair to either of us. And you know what? If you've made it this far in this story, if you're still listening, please hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and leave a comment below telling me what you think about this situation. Your comments genuinely help small creators like me keep making these stories, and I read every single one. Seriously, it means the world. Now, back to what happened next. I crossed my arms, leaning back in my chair, trying to look more confident than I felt. Oh, so what's the solution then? Counseling? Divorce? Are you just going to throw in the towel because I make a few jokes you don't like? This isn't about the jokes, he said, his voice completely steady now, unnervingly calm. This is about respect, about whether or not you even want to be with me, because right now it feels like you don't, like you'd be happier with someone else entirely. I scoffed, throwing my hands up. That's insane! You're blowing this way out of proportion. No, he said, looking me directly in the eyes with this intensity I'd never seen before. I'm asking for the truth. Is there someone else you wish you were with, or is it just that I was never the guy you really wanted in the first place? The question hit like a punch to the gut, and for a second I couldn't even speak, couldn't form words. My first instinct was to deny it completely, to lash out and deflect, but something in his tone stopped me cold. He wasn't angry, he wasn't even accusing me really. He was just done, completely and utterly done with all of it. I stood up, pushing my chair back with way more force than I meant to. You know what, Marcus? Maybe your friends were right. Maybe this is a lost cause. You want to sit here and play the victim like you've been some perfect husband, but you haven't been. And maybe, just maybe, I'm not the bad guy here. Maybe we're just not meant to be together. Did you ever think of that? He didn't say anything, just looked at me with this calm, almost resigned expression on his face. And for the first time, I realized he wasn't trying to win the argument anymore. He was trying to figure out if there was even anything left worth fighting for between us. "What do you want to do?" he asked quietly. "Because I can't keep doing this, Elena. We either fix it or we walk away. There's no middle ground anymore." I didn't have an answer. For the first time in a really long time, I genuinely didn't know what to say. Marcus and I sat in silence for what felt like forever after his question. Fix it or walk away. Those were the only options left. I wasn't used to him putting me on the spot like this. Normally, he'd back down eventually, let me deflect and redirect, and everything would just go back to normal like it always did. But not this time. This time, he was dead serious, and the weight of his words was just hanging there in the air between us, suffocating. Finally, I sighed, trying to sound composed and reasonable. "All right, if you want to fix it, we'll try counseling." His eyebrows raised slightly, and I could see he genuinely wasn't expecting me to agree so quickly. "Really?" "Yes," I said, leaning forward and clasping my hands together on the table like I was being completely sincere. "I don't want to throw this marriage away. If you think counseling will help, then let's do it. Let's try." Sarcastically, whispers. It wasn't a total lie. I mean, I didn't want a divorce. I liked my life, and Marcus was a part of that life, a comfortable part. But the truth was, I figured this whole thing was just a phase he was going through. He was feeling himself a bit after that little pep talk from his friends. But he'd come back down to earth soon enough. I was sure of it. Scheduling counseling? Sure, I'd say I'd do that. Actually going through with it? Well, that was another story entirely. I told him I'd find a counselor and set something up, but weeks went by and I never actually did it. I just kept putting it off. Every time he brought it up, which was pretty often at first, I had an excuse ready. "Oh, I've been so busy with work," or "the ones I found are all booked up for months," or "I'm still waiting for someone to call me back." He seemed to believe me at first. Or at least he stopped asking as many questions, and I figured he'd gotten over the whole thing, just like I thought he would, just like he always did. Then one night, he brought it up again. We were sitting on the couch, watching TV, something mindless, and he just turned to me out of nowhere and said, "You never scheduled counseling, did you?" I froze for just a second, but quickly recovered, putting on my defensive face. "I told you I've been trying. It's not as easy as it sounds, Marcus." "Don't lie to me," he said, his voice calm but absolutely firm, cutting right through my excuse. "You never planned to do it, did you?" I rolled my eyes immediately, feeling cornered. "Oh, come on, Marcus. Don't act like I don't care about this marriage. I said I'd do it and I will, eventually." "No," he said, cutting me completely off. "You won't, and you don't care. Not enough anyway. If you did, we wouldn't even be sitting here having this conversation. I want the divorce." "What did you just say?" He said I wanted divorce. He repeated, his tone steady and unwavering. "This isn't healthy. You don't respect me, Elena, and I can't be with someone who doesn't even want to try to fix things. Someone who won't even take the first basic step." I laughed, but it was more out of complete disbelief than anything else. "You're not serious."
I am, he said, looking me dead in the eye with zero hesitation. I've been serious for a while now. I just needed to make sure this wasn't fixable. And it's not. You've shown me that clearly enough. You're being ridiculous, I said, shaking my head rapidly. You're just mad right now. You'll calm down and see how stupid this whole thing is. No, Ilona, he said firmly. I'm not mad. I'm clear. I'm clear-headed for the first time in years. I deserve better than this. That's when it really hit me, like actually sunk in. He wasn't bluffing. He wasn't trying to make some dramatic point or win an argument. He meant it. He genuinely wanted out. And I panicked completely. Are you kidding me? I snapped, standing up and glaring down at him. You want a divorce after everything I've done for you? After all the years I've put up with you being weak and passive? And stop, he said sharply, holding up his hand. But I ignored him completely. No, you're going to hear this, I said, my voice getting louder and louder, just everything pouring out. You're pathetic, Marcus. You've always been pathetic. You let me walk all over you for years, and now suddenly you think you're some big man because your little friends told you to grow a backbone? You're a joke. Elena, no, I shouted, and I could feel tears streaming down my face now, hot and angry. I wish I never married you. You're an embarrassment, a fragile, weak excuse for a man. You can't even handle a little joke without running to your friends like a child, and now you think you're better than me? You think you deserve better? By the time I finished, I was shaking, my chest heaving with emotion and rage and fear all mixed together. But as the words just hung there in the silence, I realized something horrible. There was no one else to blame anymore. Not Marcus, not his friends, not anyone else. Just me. He stared at me for a long, painful moment, his expression completely unreadable, processing everything I'd just screamed at him. Then he stood up calmly and walked to the door, grabbing his jacket. You don't have to say anything else, he said quietly, not even looking back at me. I'll stay at Tyler's for now. You can call me when you've had time to think about what you really want, if you even know. And just like that, he was gone, the door closing softly behind him. For the first time in our entire relationship, I wasn't the one in control anymore. And for the first time, I didn't know if I even wanted him to come back, or if I'd already destroyed everything beyond repair. Weeks went by after Marcus told me he wanted a divorce. He stayed at Tyler's place most nights, but came back to the house every few days to pick up clothes or sort through his stuff, figure out what was his and what was ours. Every time I saw him, it felt like he was someone completely different, someone I didn't even know. He didn't look at me the same way anymore, didn't speak to me with any warmth or familiarity. It was like I was a stranger to him. Just some person he used to know. And it absolutely killed me inside. I'd try to make small talk when he came by, anything to break through that coldness between us, but he kept everything short and polite, like he was talking to a coworker he barely knew, professional and distant. The minute he left, I'd fall apart completely. I'd sit on the couch and just cry, wondering how things had gotten so bad so fast. How we'd ended up here. But as much as I hated the situation, as much as it tore me apart, I couldn't bring myself to take any real responsibility for it. I just couldn't. I kept telling myself it was his fault, that he'd let his friends poison his mind against me, turn him into someone else. That's what I had to believe to keep myself from completely drowning in regret and self-hatred. When the divorce was finally finalized, it was as fair as it could have been. No one got completely screwed over. Neither of us walked away with significantly more than the other. I kept the house, he kept the car, and we split the savings evenly down the middle, everything neat and clean and legal. But it didn't feel like a win, not even close. It felt like losing a part of myself that I could never get back. Like,
What did you just say? I said I want a divorce, he repeated, his tone steady and unwavering. This isn't healthy. You don't respect me, Alina, and I can't be with someone who doesn't even want to try to fix things. Someone who won't even take the first basic step. I laughed, but it was more out of complete disbelief than anything else. You're not serious. I am, he said, looking me dead in the eye with zero hesitation. I've been serious for a while now. I just needed to make sure this wasn't fixable. And it's not. You've shown me that clearly enough. You're being ridiculous, I said, shaking my head rapidly. You're just mad right now. You'll calm down and see how stupid this whole thing is. No, Elena, he said firmly. I'm not mad. I'm clear. I'm clear-headed for the first time in years. I deserve better than this. That's when it really hit me, like actually sunk in. He wasn't bluffing. He wasn't trying to make some dramatic point or win an argument. He meant it. He genuinely wanted out. And I panicked completely. Are you kidding me? I snapped, standing up and glaring down at him. You want a divorce after everything I've done for you? After all the years I've put up with you being weak and passive and... Stop, he said sharply, holding up his hand. But I ignored him completely. No, you're going to hear this, I said, my voice getting louder and louder, everything just pouring out. You're pathetic, Marcus. You've always been pathetic. You let me walk all over you for years, and now suddenly you think you're some big man because your little friends told you to grow a backbone? You're a joke. Elena, no, I shouted, and I could feel tears streaming down my face now, hot and angry. I wish I never married you. You're an embarrassment, a fragile, weak excuse for a man. You can't even handle a little joke without running to your friends like a child. And now you think you're better than me? You think you deserve better? By the time I finished, I was shaking, my chest heaving with emotion and rage and fear, all mixed together. But as the words just hung there in the air, echoing in the silence, I realized something horrible. There was no one else to blame anymore. Not Marcus, not his friends, not anyone else. Just me. He stared at me for a long, painful moment, his expression completely unreadable, processing everything I'd just screamed at him. Then he stood up calmly and walked to the door, grabbing his jacket. You don't have to say anything else, he said, quietly, not even looking back at me. I'll stay at Tyler's for now. You can call me when you've had time to think about what you really want, if you even know. And just like that, he was gone, the door closing softly behind him. For the first time in our entire relationship, I wasn't the one in control anymore. And for the first time, I didn't even know if I wanted him to come back, or if I'd already destroyed everything beyond repair. Weeks went by after Marcus told me he wanted a divorce. He stayed at Tyler's place most nights, but came back to the house every few days to pick up clothes or sort through his stuff, figure out what was his and what was ours. Every time I saw him, it felt like he was someone completely different, someone I didn't even know. He didn't look at me the same way anymore, didn't speak to me with any warmth or familiarity. It was like I was a stranger to him, just some person he used to know, and it absolutely killed me inside. I'd try to make small talk when he came by, anything to break through that coldness between us. But he kept everything short and polite, like he was talking to a coworker he barely knew, professional and distant. The minute he left, I'd fall apart completely. I'd sit on the couch and just cry, wondering how things had gotten so bad so fast, how we'd ended up here. But as much as I hated the situation, as much as it tore me apart, I couldn't bring myself to take any real responsibility for it. I just couldn't.
I kept telling myself it was his fault, that he'd let his friends poison his mind against me, turn him into someone else. That's what I had to believe to keep myself from completely drowning in regret and self-hatred. When the divorce was finally finalized, it was as fair as it could have been. No one got completely screwed over. Neither of us walked away with significantly more than the other. I kept the house, he kept the car, and we split the savings evenly down the middle. Everything neat and clean and legal. Fake at all, he looked strong, confident, different, like the man I used to wish he'd be. But too late. Way too late for it to matter for us. I tried to distract myself, tried to move on with my life and pretend everything was fine. I downloaded dating apps, swiped through profiles, went on a few dates here and there. But it was all a joke, honestly. The guys I met were either completely weird, broke, looking for something I wasn't offering, or just not him. I didn't even know what I wanted anymore, what I was looking for. All I knew was that I didn't want to end up alone. That terrified me. But with every passing week, every empty conversation, that possibility started to feel more and more real, more inevitable. I still told myself the divorce was for the best, that Marcus wasn't the man I needed, that he'd always been too weak, too passive. I kept telling myself I'd find someone stronger, more decisive, someone who could actually handle me, match my energy, someone who wouldn't crumble under a little teasing. But every single time I saw his name pop up on my newsfeed, every time I saw another photo of him looking genuinely content, that little voice in the very back of my head, the one I tried so hard to ignore, told me I'd made a terrible mistake. And that maybe, just maybe, I'd been the problem all along, the weak one, the broken one. But I'd never say that out loud. Not to anyone. Not to a therapist, not even to myself in the mirror. Because admitting that, truly accepting it, would mean facing everything I'd destroyed, everything I'd lost through my own actions, my own cruelty. And I just couldn't do that. So instead, I sat alone in the house we used to share, scrolling through his photos, watching him live a life that didn't include me anymore. A better life. And somewhere deep inside, buried under all the denial and defensiveness and pride, I knew the truth. I knew I'd had something real, something valuable, someone who actually loved me, despite everything. And I'd thrown it away because I couldn't stop myself from tearing him down, because making people laugh at his expense felt better in the moment than protecting the man I'd promised to love. Marcus deserved better. He always had. And now he was out there, finding it, living it, being it. While I sat here, alone, finally understanding what respect actually meant. Finally understanding what I'd lost. But understanding came too late, like it always does. Way too late.